Hi guys, it's Steph here from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a books beside my bed video for you. If you're new here, I film one of these every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and for anyone who's very familiar with the series, welcome back. This is my reading week from the 30th until the 5th of October. I read a total of 12 things this week. That equated to 2,594 pages, and my yearly reading total is 442 books. There's a lot to get through, but some of these are fairly short. There's a whole lot of short stories and novellas and things in this week, so we're just going to jump straight in. The first book that I read was Magic Slays by Alone Andrews. This is book 5 in the Kate Daniels series. It is part of the Kate Daniels read along, which we have the upcoming live show for this book and the other books in this month's wrap up coming up this weekend. So once that's scheduled, I'll leave a link to it in the description. In this one, we see that Kate is starting to really try and make a go of her new investigative agency that she has started after she left the Order of the Knights of Merciful Aid, and it's not going quite to plan, but then she is called for help by the Master of the Dead from Atlanta with the vampire problem, and as it turns out, this is not an isolated incident, which causes a whole lot of things to go wrong very, very quickly. We also see Kate learning more about pack politics because she has now moved into the keep. She's living with Curran, and she's also dealing with things with Julie. We're going to talk more in depth about this in the live show, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I really love this book in particular. I feel like this is where the series, or the rest of the series, really kicks off in terms of where Kate is in terms of her alliances with people. And it's great because she also does some work in here where she is helping to mediate something to do with the guild, which is the mercenary group that she belongs to. So there's a lot of good things that kick off into motion in this book. Then I read book 5.3 in the Kate Daniels series. This is a very short novella called Magic Tests. This one is about Julie, Kate's ward. And Julie has this habit of running away from any school that Kate puts her into. And at the beginning of this book, she has returned to the keep, but there is something that is happening on a school campus for magical teens within the city. And so Kate takes Julie there under the guise of investigating the disappearance of one of the students. So it is kind of a ploy by Kate to really talk Julie into a school by getting her involved in the investigation side of things and trusting her with leading that. There's a few characters that we meet in this book that pop up throughout the rest of the series, so this is where they started, and I love that. Then I read Magic Gifts, which is book 5.4 in the Kate Daniels series. This one again is a novella. This one's about 100 pages long. The previous one's only about 30 pages long. And in this one, Kate and Curran are on a dinner date when it gets interrupted by a magical murder that occurs in the same restaurant. And it has to do with a piece of family jewelry that is gifted to someone, and things get very complicated very quickly, and Kate and Curran are racing to try and save the life of a young boy who is possibly the next victim. This one was nice because it is purely Kate and Curran trying to solve this problem, and now that we're really into the series, they do work together, but this is purely them in isolation working to figure something out, and I loved it. The next book that I read was another novella. This one was an early Patreon release from CM Nascosta. It is The Mabon Feast, and this one is set around the Mabon Festival. We follow Elizabeth, who is sort of the last heir, kind of, to sort of a witchy family, and she lives in this big old house, and she decides to rent out one of the rooms to a boarder. And as it turns out, the boarder that she rents it out to is quite literally a Spider-Man thing. And his name is Anson, and he is a very good tenant. He lives upstairs. She hears noises in the night, but other than that, he doesn't really cause any trouble. And it is their eventual relationship. It is a short monster romance. It is steamy. It does have bondage in there because you are talking about a spider, so there's going to be that sort of thing. And interestingly enough, this one didn't bother me quite as much as Ensnared by Tiffany Roberts, which I know I actually enjoyed, but this one was just interesting. It was an interesting take on it, and I suspect that Sam Nascosta is doing a series of novellas around these festivals, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they come out with next. I also read Katie Roberts' October Patreon short. This one was, I forget what we voted for. Anyway, it happens on Halloween. It is about a woman who goes to a crossroads to make a deal with a demon. It turns out to be a sex pact. And you know what? It goes from there. It's very, very short. I remember, I think at the end of this thinking, I would like to know more. Like, this would be a story I would be interested in pursuing and finding a little bit more about in the backstory. So hopefully that one gets expanded at some point. I also read Her Soul for Revenge, which is book 2 in the Souls trilogy by Harley LaRue. If you can't tell already, this week I read a lot of new releases. So this one is about Juniper and Zane, and the entire story runs parallel to the first book. So we do see a lot of the first book events happening and unfolding, but from different perspectives. So if that is not your thing, be aware of that going into it, because a lot of people, I know this bothered them. I had forgotten a few things about her soul to take, so it took me a hot minute to recognize that. And in the end, it didn't bother me so much because I was enjoying the characters. But it is basically the same story from a different perspective and for different reasons. So just be aware of that. It is about Juniper, who escaped being sacrificed to the demon in the forest of this town. And when she escaped, she was assisted by Zane. She didn't know him at the time, but he decided that he wanted her and he was going to play the long game. So he helped her escape. And so he's basically been stalking her for the longest time. Eventually, she ends up being called back into the town and gets caught up in everything that is happening there. So in this town, there is an old god that is living underground, and in order for it to rise, it needs to have the sacrifice of the 3 original founding members of the town who fell into the hole and it released. And so 6 generations later, it wants its sacrifice so that it can be reborn. I like the atmosphere in this series. I think it is really dark and creepy. There are a whole lot of trigger warnings in here, and I will go through them in a minute. Just so people are aware, you have to read the content warnings at the start of the book just so that you are aware of what's going on. I didn't find any of it particularly triggering myself, not that that says much about me, because I don't find very many things triggering. I have very, very specific triggers. But I do like the atmosphere of dark, creepy, small towns with gods and monsters and things roaming around. It does have a very new adult feel to it, but not in the same way as a contemporary new adult, if that makes sense. So in terms of things to be aware of, there is drug use, human sacrifice, obviously, loss and death of family members, trauma, anxiety, PTSD, suicide, domestic violence, and then there is a lot of hard kink and edge play. I won't go into all of those, but you have to read content warnings if you have any issues with hard kinks. So check those out. Will I continue the series? Probably, because I'm very interested in the 3rd character. I'm interested to see whether that story plays out in the same timeline. I don't know at this point. And yeah, I think it would be interesting. We shall see. Then I read the one Impossible Labyrinth by Matthew Riley. This is his most recent release. It is the 7th and final book in the Jack West Jr. series. This is an action thriller type series. Matthew Riley is Australian. I've been reading his books since I was, 15 years old. So I have a very long-standing history with Matthew Riley, and despite the fact that I don't always agree with some of the things that he includes in his books, white male syndrome, I do really enjoy the books. So I will say outright that he does some things, not necessarily in this book, although I'll talk about one in a minute. He does some things in his books that you just question, but he basically writes action movies and books, and that's all I want in life. If I could have action movies in books every day of the year, I would be very, very happy. It would totally sway me out of any other genre. Anyway, so this one being the 7th and final book, it's really hard to talk about it. Our hero, Jack West Jr., is an Australian former soldier. He is caught up in this giant quest that involves saving the world from people taking an ancient power. And at the beginning of this book, his entire team has been split into, I think, 3 groups, and they're all racing towards the same goal. Some of them are trying to get the extra information that they need. Some of them are actually in depth and in danger, and it's just really fast paced, really interesting. He did something in this book in the first couple of chapters that had my blood boiling. It's only because it's something that he's done before, and I knew that what happened couldn't have been the final thing that happened for one of these characters because of the backlash that he got the first time. But I was just kind of frustrated that it even hinted at it in this book, and it just drove me absolutely up the wall. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I love the fast paced, I love the adventure, but I just wish he hadn't tried to go down a path that he's gone down before that just didn't work for him. There is only one book that he's ever written that I would not pick up again because of what he did. And I'm happy to tell people what that is. If you want, just message me. Probably not in the comments because, you know, spoilers, but feel free to message me elsewhere and I can tell you what it is. And all I can say is Matthew Riley is bloody lucky that I just love the actual style of book that he writes, because this might have gotten thrown across the room otherwise. Then I read Archangel's Light by Nalini Singh. This is the newest book in the Guild Hunter series. I think it's book 14. And I was so excited. This is sort of the book that everyone's been waiting for. And I'm going to preface this by saying that I know some people were not happy with how she did what she did, or with perhaps how it evolved. Me, on the other hand, I was thrilled. So take that as you will. Take that as bad judgment. Maybe it's, again, it's nostalgia and enjoying the series and this author. So this is an urban fantasy paranormal romance series, and this is the development of the romantic relationship between 2 of Raphael's 7. So 2 of his angels that serve him as best friends and guards and all that sort of thing. So we have Ilium, whose nickname is Bluebell because he has these fully gorgeous blue wings, and Aiden, or Sparkles, because he's like sparkly white from head to toe. From the very start of the series, we have known that these two are the best of friends. They have a really close relationship. They are closer than brothers, but nothing had ever happened between the two of them. And they've known each other since they were very, very young. In this book, they're kind of estranged. Some things have happened in the series and they're estranged, and Aiden is working in China supporting the new Archangel, who is trying to rebuild China after what has happened in previous books. And he hasn't talked to Ilium in months. And so when Ilium is sent there to support Aiden with what's going on, there is a huge amount of tension between the two of them. And they have to sort it out because they have hundreds of years of history together and repressed feelings, for lack of a better term. And they have to sort it out. Now, this book is not steamy, and part of me kind of understands why. I know there is a lot of questions around straight women writing fiction, and I agree that there are some that are incredibly problematic. I think Nalini Singh might have been trying to toe the line between appropriating something and still trying to give people the story that they wanted. And in that sense, I think she probably did a decent job, because they really don't confirm their relationship until like the last 20% of the book. And that's fine. So this is the slowest of slow burns, and it is just, I loved it. They are solving a mystery. There is some slightly creepy elements in it. And while I generally like a little bit more steam in my romance books, and it would have been great in this case, I also kind of understand why it wasn't there. That said, I'm really happy with the way that Nalini Singh had tackled this. So take that as you will. Go listen to other reviews or read other reviews, because I think everyone's going to have a different reaction to this. I actually don't mind those slower relationships in urban fantasy series. I think sometimes the world is bigger than the relationship, and that's okay. I also read Happily Ever Afterwards by Sean McAuliffe. This is a sort of middle grade-ish style collection of fractured fairy tales. In this one, we are following the new Queen Matilda, who is traveling around her kingdom and meeting people, learning about what it is exactly that they need, and getting caught up in a whole lot of town's problems that she has to solve. Plenty of fairy tales and folklore come into play in this, with lots and lots of characters popping up here and there and then getting involved in this story. It is fun, it is entertaining. If you're Australian and you know who Sean McAuliffe is, you'll hear his voice as you're reading the story. He has a very distinctive voice and it comes through in his writing. This one does skew a little bit older, so if you are an adult reading it, you will definitely get some of the humour that comes through, but I highly enjoyed it. I also read Lore Olympus Volume 1 by Rachel Smythe. Now, I had read probably about half the episodes that are included in the first physical volume, so there was some of it that was new to me. I thoroughly enjoyed this experience. I can't wait for them all to be released. I know I can read it online, but I don't have the greatest success with reading web comics online, so I am very excited for these to be released. I will be collecting them. If you are unfamiliar, it is a Hades and Persephone retelling. It has the most gorgeous color palette, art style for a webcomic, and it is about Hades, who has sort of escaped her very controlling mother and is living in the city with Artemis, who is one of her friends, and she ends up going out for the night. She's convinced to go out for the night, and then she crosses paths with Hades, but things don't go quite according to plan. Anyway, she begins to develop a crush on Hades, and he is quite smitten with her as well, and yet all of the gods, politics, and things like that come into play. There are content warnings in this volume for sexual assault, and also a whole heaping stack of jealousy thrown in there. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I am hanging out for the next volume to be released, because I will be reading that one really quickly. And then the last book that I read this week was Queen by Katie Robert. This is the third and final book in the Bloodline Vampires series, although the spin-off books are going to be part of the monster romance books that she's publishing with the gorgeous vintage style romance covers. I'm gonna say off the bat, this one I enjoyed. I enjoyed it a lot, but I was also a little bit disappointed with it. So it's super short, and this is her reverse harem vampire series. So Mina was originally sent to Malachi by her father, who is a very controlling, power-hungry sort of vampire, and she was sent to Malachi with the purpose of becoming pregnant so that her father could then claim the baby and then claim the bloodline vampire powers from Malachi's line. Obviously that didn't go according to plan, and Mina and Malachi ended up with this relationship with two of Malachi's closest friends, Ryland and Wolf. The four of them are a really strong team, but at the beginning of Queen they've been separated and her men have been kidnapped, and she wants to get them back. She does, and then they go after her father and so on and so forth. So that all wraps up. It just felt like it probably needed maybe 50 more pages to flesh out some of the things that happen. Some of the things were very convenient. And I hate saying that about Katie Robert, because I think it was still very fun. It was still very entertaining. It was short and quick and easy to read, and it was super steamy. Not as steamy, I don't think, as some of the previous books in the series, because there is a huge part of the book where they are separated from each other. But yeah, it felt different from her previous books. That said, I was reading an early release copy, so maybe things will change. I will probably go and read the final copy as well, just to see if there are any changes made. So just be aware of that going into it. I am glad that I've finished out the series because this one has been long awaited, and yeah. So those are the books that I read this week. It's been a busy reading week, mostly because I've been stress reading because, oh boy, things have been weird with work. But you know what? We're approaching the end of the year. I can't believe it's nearly the middle of November. That is just absolutely insane. In the next coming week, I have to finish out the Kate Daniels books for this month. So I've got Gunmetal Magic. I've also got a stack of other things that have come in, review books and whatnot. And I do need to do a recently read picture book release video as well. So all of those things are in the works. In the comments, I would love to know what you have read in the last 7 days, or if you've read any of the books that I've read and what your thoughts are on them. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave a gift emoji. One of the books is called Magic Gifts. Let's just go with that. It's quick and easy and something that I can think of that I know that there is an emoji for. Leave a gift in the comments. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.